evening, folks, and welcome to another episode of the Third Impact Anime Podcast. This time, we're getting very spooky, very creepy for our 2022 Halloween special. Mwahahaha. On this episode, we are reviewing the 2004 TV anime Paranoia Agent, directed by the legendary Satoshi Kon. I am your host for this episode, Skeleton, and who am I joined by in this wonderful and very scary Discord call?
It is I, Bill, eating my Count Chocula and Boo Betty. Hopefully not ruining my perfect shiny teeth as I walk down the street.
Are you a cereal for dinner kind of guy?
If I'm in a pinch.
I appreciate that you can go for the easy serial killer joke. Thank you, Austin.
Dang, missed opportunity.
Hi, it's Tori. I'm here to take a rest and reject reality.
That's what we do here.
And I'm Taboo Ass. That's me.
You did what to my what?
You figure that out later.
So yes, on this episode, we're talking about the psychological thriller anime Paranoia Agent, which is pretty cool because it's been quite a long time since we've talked about any Satoshi Kon stuff on the podcast. I think the last thing we did was, funny enough, a Christmas special back when we first started being Third Impact Anime. Like, one of our first episodes was reviewing Tokyo Godfathers, and I don't think we've returned to the Satoshi Kon pool since then.
We also did Memories, which is not a fully Satoshi Kon work, but he did work on the big famous segment of that anthology work.
That's true. I would definitely say that counts. Like,
it certainly feels like we would have done that by now. We're all fans of Kon's work, and even if we don't have an actual podcast in the pipe, it certainly feels like we talk about Kon a lot. As we should, because
that's true.
Wow, what an output.
I mean, honestly, and it is just coincidentally, we didn't really plan this at all because, again, this is kind of going to be serving as our Halloween special, but it was actually just his birthday, maybe, I don't know, a few days ago from the time of this recording. So, it's as good a time as any to remember Satoshi Kon's output and his legacy.
Yeah.
Left us too soon.
Honestly, yes, for sure. But yeah, this should be a fun one. I don't think... I would argue that Paranoia Agent isn't itself very Halloween-esque, but it is sort of psychological horror thriller, and I think it fits in within sort of the broader genre of horror anime, so I think it's pretty appropriate to do it for a Halloween special. But before that, I kind of wanted to ask you guys, just to get the ball rolling at the top of the podcast, what are some of your favorite anime that give you the most fall vibes? And that can mean whatever you want it to mean.
Fall vibes. Well, I don't really, I thought about this, and can't really associate that many series with any season, really. That's not flat out, like snowy for winter or, beachy for summer. I think generally when I think of fall, I think of like Anime Weekend Atlanta and coming back to, my anime battery's charged up, ready to watch something new. So it makes me think of way back in like 2010 when watching like Penny and Stocking as that was coming out, and like Squid Girl that season, and then just like a few years later watching Kill la Kill, being excited for that new show. But as far as vibes go, I think maybe what was that? Haibane Rinmei has what I would consider the same vibes that I enjoy in autumn. I mean, autumn's the best month. Let's just go ahead and get that out there. No contest. Absolutely best season.
Autumn is not a month, but I hear what you're saying.
Well, okay. But something about Haibane Rinmei it's not really dreary, but kinda. It's like brownish. It's got that brown tint. Like, it feels just kind of chilly and cold. The weather does. I don't know. Something about it just gives me that sort of... I mean, you guys when the weather turns, like, you can smell autumn, right? I'm not the only person that can, like, notice the smell of the season, right?
Oh, no. Oh no.
And it's not
Yeah,
just like it.
Yeah, Tori and I
It's
were
not just
talking
like
about
the
that
pumpkin.
just like a couple weeks ago.
It's not just like, the pumpkin spice lattes come out, you smell that. Like, there's something in the atmosphere that just feels different. It's very nostalgic because, that's generally when school starts back, when you're a kid. But something about that just matches Haibana Rinmei to me, I feel like.
Yeah, it's a good pick. What do you think, Tori?
Soft autumn vibes, Little Witch Academia for sure.
Yeah.
I don't know, I just think of like, witches and kind of like the fun, mischievous side, like the innocent side of Halloween and having a good time. If I want like scary autumn vibes, I don't know, maybe Yami Shibai or like Shiki or something. Yeah.
No, that's fair. I kind of wanted to pick Little Witch Academia for mine, but I went with a slightly different pick that is basically the same pick, but I'll get to that after Bill. Go ahead.
Oh boy.
What do you think, Bill?
This might be a little out of left field, but I would say Spice and Wolf. For me, fits
Ooh, yeah.
Pumpkin
kind of the
Spice and
fall.
Wolf.
Kind of fits the fall vibe because just like I remember watching that for the first time in the fall. I think both seasons that came out during the fall season. In terms of just when the show takes place, it's majority of the time during like kind of the fall winter season, and it just especially with that opening sequence. Yeah, so that kind of reminds me of the fall time, just in terms of aesthetics.
Yeah, no, that's totally fair. That's a series that I haven't really approached in any meaningful way beyond watching like the first episode like many, many years ago. But I like shows that are like mostly vibes. So maybe I need to revisit that one at some point. But my pick is Little Camp Academia, Laid Back Camp. And I know that Laid Back Camp, like, it mostly takes place in like the winter months, but it kind of goes throughout the seasons, like through the progression of time. But that show is just so good at evoking this sense of like coziness and matching our moods and our behaviors to the changing of the weather that I associate it with fall a little bit more so than winter. And yeah, so that one's my pick.
Nice.
Yeah.
Good choice.
Thank you. All right, folks. Well, we're going to take a quick break. And after that, we're going to get into talking about our topic in earnest. Please don't go away.
You gotta try reverse psychology. If you ask them to, they're going to turn it off.
Okay.
But tell them to get the hell out. Scram, kids. That'll keep them listening.
To begin, a rabbit jumps behind the moon. What is it that the black rabbit sees on the horizon with his big red eyes? A fish on the land has trouble when he's stepped on by cows. The playful palace where the butterfly dances vanishes away. At twilight, the cow starts it by chance, and the goodness continues. The golden box grins at you, then...
So yeah, we're back. We're going to be talking about Paranoia Agent and kind of because I was kind of the spearhead for wanting to make this episode happen this year as our Halloween special because, in previous years we've done a number of different things for our Halloween specials. We've done like, we did
Vampire
kind of an
Hunter D.
overview of like, did we do Vampire Hunter? We didn't actually do Vampire Hunter D as a Halloween special, but we have talked about it before, way back. And then we did Tori and Tobias. You guys were there when we kind of picked our broad Halloween picks, and we brought like a lot of things to the table.
We also talked about Paranoia Agent on that episode.
We did.
Briefly.
Very briefly. That's true. And what else did we do for other
Wasn't
Halloween
Little Witch
episodes?
Academia a Halloween episode?
I don't
No, that
think
was
so.
a
No,
separate thing.
that was after
The
Halloween.
only Halloween episode we did was the one you mentioned with me, Tori, Austin, Sarah.
Well, anyway, I've wanted to get through Paranoia Agent for quite some time, mostly because it's like the one Satoshi Kon thing that I had not seen. So it's like I kind of really wanted to watch it, but I've kind of had this general hesitation about wanting to actually finish the show for a number of years, because after I was done with it, I knew there was not going to be any Satoshi Kon anime left. But I also knew, like,
Aw.
I needed to come to the point of being like, okay, well, I need to stop putting it off and just watch the thing. So I think picking it for this year's Halloween episode was just the push that I needed to finally knock it off of my list. But I
You might say that rather than avoiding the situation and letting it eat away at you, Little Slugger rolled up and smacks you in the face with his Blu-ray set and frees you from that worry.
Little Slugger, of course, being the Third Impact Anime Podcast.
Yes.
Of course. And we're here to thwack all of you listening at home. But yeah, so I guess my general familiarity with it is that, I mean, I think I've talked about this either on the podcast or on a panel before. It's like, I've known about Satoshi Kon for a very long time, since like the beginning of my serious anime fandom back in high school, when I started getting into it more seriously and wanting to sort of, you know, look into all the things that are sort of in the anime canon, so to speak. So I saw Paprika back then, and then slowly went through his entire catalog. But again, like I said, Paranoia Agent, I missed it on TV, didn't really go out of my way to check it out for many years, while knowing that it was always there until this year. So what about you guys? What was your first general experience with Paranoia Agent?
So, unlike you, I do remember when TV was linear and when it, came over the airwaves. And I do remember
when there were only 4 channels.
Yeah, one of those channels was Adult Swim. But I don't think I actually watched it on TV. I might have caught an episode or two, but it was only a few years later that I sat down and breezed through it. And like originally, I've got another sort of admission to make here, a confession, if you will. I think this is the first time that I actually like got Paranoia Agent, if I'm being honest. Like when I watched it the first time, one of the first things I heard about it was, this is like a Japanese ghost story. It's just a Japanese ghost story about the modern times, man. But it's being told like a Japanese ghost story. And I was so enamored with the concept of it being like a horror thing, in sheep's clothing, that I was more worried about that than actually understanding what it was trying to say. When you hear the title like Paranoia Agent, like back in the day, that was just a cool ass title. Paranoia Agent, hell yeah, that sounds awesome. But I don't think it was like until this watch that I really got what it was trying to say with paranoia, and that and what it's saying here. So yeah, this was I think honestly probably one of the last con things I've seen as well, when you look at the grand scheme of things.
Mm-hmm. I was lucky, and I actually got to watch it on TV when it first aired.
Oh,
So
I felt old.
yeah. So I think, to make everybody feel old, but I think I was only like 12 or 13 when it aired on TV. And I was just like very enamored. I didn't understand anything that was going on at all. I thought the theme song was very weird, and I think that's kind of like what gripped me. And I was like, okay, well, this is strange, and I like the vibes, but I have no idea what's going on. And there's a couple episodes that still even like stuck with me, and I can remember very vividly. But then like I watched it like several years ago again, and was like, okay, no, this is still very good. I still very much love this. It's probably in my top 10. But then yeah, watching it again this week, it feels like it clicked again in a completely different way. And like you said, I feel like I get it a lot better now. Having more like worldly experiences and like understanding the world a little bit better as an adult. And like I was talking to Austin just a couple days ago and was like, dang, like I know this was released in 2004, but some of this stuff really still holds up and is happening socially. So but yeah, long roundabout way to just say that I got to see it when it aired on TV, and that was cool.
You guys are doing the equivalent of typing first on the YouTube video. Well, I got to see it on
Oh,
TV.
thank you. Yeah.
Yep. All power to you, of course. Bill, what's your history with Paranoia Agent?
like a lot of people, I kind of heard about Satoshi Kon's name through kind of osmosis and in my anime fandom, and then I slowly got to go through his movies, and I really liked them, and then I kind of saved Paranoia Agent for last because I knew it was the last thing of his that I hadn't seen. So I've waited
You're
until
just like
this very
me.
podcast.
You're just like
Yeah,
me.
yes, just like you. But hey, I'm gonna technically say it's not the last Satoshi Kon thing because there's still that Satoshi Kon documentary that has been made and that aired in France. It's still not here yet.
Mm-hmm.
Come on, G
I
kids.
still haven't seen Paprika, so
Hey, there you go.
Oh man, that's the
There you
next
go.
episode.
Yes. I'm going to say it right now. At some point, we will be doing an episode on Paprika. There it is. It's in stone.
cool.
Well, so I think I'm happy I saw Paranoia Agent now as an older adult, because if I watched this as a teenager, it would have gone over my head. And it's I don't mean to make comparisons, but it was the way I was watching it. I couldn't help but kind of make Eva comparisons a bit, because while there is a central story to Paranoia Agent, the central story doesn't really matter. It's more of a character piece, just like Ava is, if you really think about it.
Oh yeah.
Where each of these episodes, as we go along, we learn more about these characters' flaws and kind of a darker side to these people as we go through the journey of Paranoia.
Cool. So I guess that kind of generally establishes, where we're coming from in this review. But just to backtrack a little bit, I did want to share a couple of points of the background of this show and some production details that I think are pretty important to know for this show, generally speaking. So the series aired in Japan from February until May of 2004. It was originally released on DVD by the now defunct anime company Genion, and was later picked up by Funimation probably in like the late 2010s, after being out of print for many years, and they put it on Blu-ray for the first time, and it was on streaming for the first time. And Funimation rescued the series and put it out on Blu-ray after being out of print for a number of years, and they put it up on streaming. So it's probably more available now than it ever was, thankfully. An English dub ran on Adult Swim in May of 2005, which is obviously where Tobias and Tori would have seen it. And then they did a revival airing back in as recently as 2020, so that's pretty cool.
That's pretty cool.
So the series was produced by Studio Madhouse, who's a very prolific and long-running anime production studio, who also around that time was working on things like Boogie Pop Phantom, which is, kind of adjacently connected to Paranoia Agent in a number of ways, both from a staff perspective and from a thematic perspective. They were also working on Hajime no Ippo, which is, I know, something Bill really likes, and Naoki Urasawa's monster anime, Beck Mongolian Chop Squad, Metropolis, the Cardcaptor Sakura movies, and, of course, the all-time classic Kirby Right Back At Ya.
Yeah, when I think of Madhouse and their entire history, the thing that I snap right back to is the Kirby adaptation.
I mean, that's the only thing that they should be remembered for.
Sully, would you go on this episode? When did you sneak over?
So, Paranoia Agent was conceived of, written, and directed, again, by the legendary anime creator Satoshi Kon, the director of some of the best and most enduring psychological thriller anime of all time, like Perfect Blue and Paprika. And by 2004, he had been working with Studio Madhouse and producer Masao Maruyama on a number of projects, most notably his own directed films Perfect Blue, Millennium Actress, and Tokyo Godfathers. And apparently Paranoia Agent itself grew out of a bunch of ideas that Kon had had while producing his previous works, and he thought that they would fit better into a semi-anthological TV series rather than a feature film.
They started production on Paranoia Agent around the same time as Tokyo Godfathers, like at the peak of the animation process. In order to keep most of the staff together, Satoshi Kon decided we need to keep the crew together. So what should I do next? And I should do a TV series. So they started early production on Paranoia Agent in the middle of Tokyo Godfathers. There's a really if you own the Funimation Blu-ray, there's a lot of cool bonus features that you normally don't get on Blu-rays for anime. Where there's an audio commentary track with Satoshi Kon, the writer of Paranoia Agent, and the producer. And one of my favorite things he says in it is, people ask me, why do you go so fast? Well, because once you're done with your project in animation, you're unemployed. So I try and get to the next project as soon as I can in order to stay employed.
Kind of makes you wonder about that episode in the second half of the show about the animation studio that's basically like horror Shirobako, like 10 years before Shirobako.
It's funny that they did that story in episode 10 about how horrible it is for anime production when that episode actually went very smoothly for them in terms of production. It was episode 2 where they were struggling to find somebody, and because of their tight deadlines.
Oh my gosh, that is the peak of irony. That the episode about the horrors of the animation world was a great delight to work on.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty funny.
That's amazing. So, Tobias, lay it on us. What is Paranoia Agent actually about? Is this some sort of like? Is it about Agent Smith murmuring to himself in the basement? Like, what is this show about?
I don't know what that means, but what it is about.
You haven't seen The Matrix? Come on.
But The Matrix? What?
Yeah, I said Agent Smith. Shut up.
Came out.
Never mind.
So this, Austin, you threw me off my gimbal. Anyway, so this show takes place in a sort of a modern day Tokyo. Well, I say modern day, modern being the 2000s when this series was being made. A little bit different than modern day 2020s, but it sort of centers around it centers around a woman named Tsukiko Sage, who is a character designer. She designs like basically Hello Kitty. Just character goods, really like is kawaii the correct term? Isn't there a term for like specifically overly kawaii characters? Maybe not.
Like kind of mascot characters, maybe? Like very Sanrio-esque.
Yes, exactly. Like she's basically making the new Hello Kitty, which is a big-eyed dog named Moromi. So she's coming off the success of making this incredibly popular character, putting under a lot of stress because she's expected to make the next Hello Kitty character, but she just can't quite figure out, the right ingredients to make a award-winning popular character. So she's going home one night with all this work stress bearing down on her. She's attacked by this mysterious boy who runs around on roller skates and a crooked golden bat who supposedly strikes her, knocking her out. And she becomes sort of the center of I guess almost like a media campaign, as everyone in this area of Tokyo is fascinated by this mysterious attacker, and they all sort of throw pity on her. So we have this personality, this young boy. They start calling him Little Slugger, as nothing really is known about him, and word starts to spread of this attack and this assailant. And we see as the series progresses, sort of tying into the anthology aspect of the series, Little Slugger attacks a number of other people, including a pair of young boys. He attacks a young woman who works at a university. He attacks who else? He attacks a cop. Rather, I'm not sure if it's a cop or an actual PI, but
I think
yeah,
he's just a
and
cop.
sort
I
of
can't
the
remember.
He's a journalist.
Well, he
yeah,
attacks
there's
the journalist too. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah, okay.
Well, yeah, there's the journalist and there's also the cop. The characters look very similar. They're very
They do.
Toad-like.
Yeah,
but
you're
they're-
right.
Yeah, but like the thing that tied these characters together, they all sort of like one character meets another sort of throughout the series. But what ties these incidents together is that they all are under a lot of stress. They all have a lot of anxiety about their situation, whether it is trying to meet expectations or sort of running away from a mental illness. And they all are under a lot of stress and deeply desire an escape. And Little Slugger, even though it's an attack on them, he provides that escape.
Mm-hmm. And that's sort of the nature of the series as it unfolds, because early on, the audience, you don't really know what Little Slugger's motive, I guess, is, for lack of a better word. And it's like, it all just seems random. But as you continue to sort of examine, who is it that Little Slugger targets, it becomes increasingly obvious that it is specifically people that are under a lot of emotional duress. The way that one of the cops puts it in the show, I don't know if he says exactly this in the Japanese version, but he says this in the dub, is like he goes after people that are emotionally cornered or something like that.
Yes.
That's kind of the way that
Yeah,
they
they also say that in the Japanese, and
Okay.
it's also, at least in the beginning, all the victims are kind of interconnected with each other.
Mm-hmm. So I guess all that being said, I think it is really important that we point out, not only Satoshi Kon being sort of the main creative force behind the series, but also a lot of other collaborators and folks on the production team that sort of brought this whole thing to life. And I think one of the people that is very important in sort of conveying the tone of this series, and that especially comes across with the opening specifically, and that's of course the musical composer Susumu Hirasawa, who is a pretty frequent collaborator with Satoshi Kon. He worked with Kon on basically all of his projects with the exception of Perfect Blue, and he was also the principal composer behind the soundtracks for the Berserk series, like from the 1997 series all the way through the sort of 2016 and 2017 anime versions. He also did the music for some of the video games, and interestingly enough, that's basically the extent of his anime work. Like, he worked with Satoshi Kon, he's worked with the Berserk franchise, and then not really anything else, which is, I think, a kind of a shame, because his musical scores are so unique and so like instantly recognizable.
He seems to be not just you know how some people just work in the anime system and that's it. He also seems to be just an artist by himself. In a Q&A that's on the Blu-ray between him and Satoshi Kon talks about his latest album at the time, and how it really inspired him for certain sequences. So I think he's not just solely working within the anime spheres, that he is also just an artist that puts out his own work.
And that way he sort of mirrors Kon. Like, Kon sure did a lot of anime and even manga early on, but it doesn't really feel like an anime director. And I think this is a perfect match with these two people.
For sure. We also have our lead character designer is another frequent Kon collaborator, and that's Masashi Ando. He worked again with Kon on Tokyo Godfathers and Paprika. Funny enough, he was behind some of the most iconic Studio Ghibli characters, like at least designing the versions that you see in the films, even if Hayao Miyazaki did like the initial like sketches and the ideas of the characters, like the ones you see in the movie, those were adapted by Masashi Ando, including the characters from Princess Mononoke and Spirited Away. He also did character designs for A Letter to Momo, which I think is really obvious whenever you stack Momo up against the works of Satoshi Kon. Like, it's pretty obvious it's the same character designer. Like, they have that kind of, that more like realistic look to them, as opposed to like, more exaggerated anime stuff, and even exaggerated to the extent that you see in like Studio Ghibli.
He also worked on Your Name, and he directed the movie all of us got to go see in the theaters recently, except Bill, The Deer King. The scripts for the series, while Satoshi Kon was the broad, concept writer and came up with the stories and everything, the actual, scripts, the words that we hear come out of the characters' mouths and the way that they come out, the scripts were done by Seishi Minakami, who also, again, wrote scripts for Boogie Pop Phantom. So, again, like I said earlier, these series are more connected than you may think. And he was the series composer and the scriptwriter for a number of the entries in the Railgun/Index series. And he, again, worked with Kon on the screenplay for Paprika. And this is an interesting factoid that I did not know about until I was looking this up, that the legendary anime director Rintaro actually came and did storyboards for episode 9, which is pretty interesting because, Rintaro, kind of a legend in the anime sphere. Like, he directed the Galaxy Express 39 movies, along with a number of other Leiji Matsumoto projects. He also directed The Dagger of Kamui, Metropolis, which I think is still criminally underrated. That's a really good movie. And the 1969 and the 1972 Moomin TV series. So that one's for you, Tori.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You
Moomin's a lot like
storyboards for
Maroon.
episode. He did storyboards for episode 9. Which episode was 9?
Episode 9 was the one with the ladies gossiping and making up all the stories about Little Slugger.
Yeah.
That was a good one.
Before we get to the cast, I'd like to go back to the screenwriter. Is in the audio commentary, at least for the first one, Kon says that he doesn't, having a good writer is nice, but someone that he can collaborate with is a plus. And Minakami was worried at first because Kon had already written the first draft for the first episode, and he was like, I don't know, you already seem to know what you want. Are you sure you want me to write this? And so Kon was like, no, you got this. We work together really well. I think you know what you're doing. And they talk a lot about the writing process in the audio commentaries where well, actually, we'll get into that later. But, yeah, just really interesting stuff.
Yeah, it is always interesting whenever you see someone who is so often branded as an auteur, this creative, this individual creative genius, a lot like what we see for the way that people talk about Satoshi Kon. And a lot of that is valid, but it's also important to remember that many of these people are also extremely talented at just bringing in other extremely talented people to collaborate with. And that's one of the keys about their success.
It's funny because I'm going to keep saying it. We'll keep a tally for how many times I say it. In the audio commentary, Kon says, people, the way this TV series is marketed is by the brilliant creator Satoshi Kon, or the fantastic mind of Satoshi Kon. And I disagree with that because I believe that this is a collaborative process, and it's not just me that's doing this, basically.
It's very easy, and we all do this as fans. It's very easy to pin an entire work on one person. Whether it's somebody like Kon or Hideo Kojima. People seem to put all the works and talk about that guy as being awesome, but no, they're only great because they have a whole team behind them. And sure, Minakami or to a lesser extent, Hirasawa may not be as quote unquote responsible for Paranoia Agent, their other works, but if we're being honest, the music, for instance, or even the scripts of the series composition, that's just as much of the show as anything else.
But this is to a larger conversation. It's easier for the marketer to put a single name behind it than just it's either just a single name or it's a studio name, and it's harder to say by this person and this person and this person because I think they're afraid that if you mention too many names that people will just zone out or they won't have the context for person's name.
Aren't people just so lucky that they are listening to a podcast where we're talking about all these cool people that are involved in making cool stuff? How about that?
Give ourselves a pat on the back.
Or they go the opposite route and they get way too vague, because I literally think it was Barbarian where they were touting it like from a producer of The Grudge, from a
Exactly.
producer of The Ring. And I'm like, okay, well, which one?
I was gonna say, like, remember when Fireworks came out and they were like, it's from the producer's best friend's, hometown
Yes.
cousin's crush of Your Names. It's like, what? Okay.
Featuring an episode that was key animated by Hayao Miyazaki.
Miyazaki looked at this.
Yes.
Yes. He glanced in
Miyazaki-
my general direction.
Miyazaki put out a cigarette on this guy's forehead once.
So moving on a bit to our cast, we're going to go through we're not going to, well, first of all, the cast in this series is pretty massive, so we can't possibly go through all of the characters, but we're going to go through like some of the key players that show up more often than others, and we're going to do the English and the Japanese folks. So Tori, let's tag team on this one. So I'm gonna get started off with our first main character, which is of course Shonen Bat in the Japanese, or Little Slugger in English, which I think, by the way, is a pretty good localization, because if they just called him Bat Boy, I don't know if that would really sell
That's
it.
a different cultural connotation for sure.
Right. I don't know if Bat Boy would really vibe, but
Speaking of old references,
Yeah.
yes. But yeah, Little Slugger, that's a solid choice, I think. And in Japanese, he is voiced by Daisuke Sakaguchi, who is Shimura Senpachi in Gintama. He is Jacuzzi in Bakano, and he is Young Ace in One Piece. And in English, he is voiced by Sam Riegel, who Bill informed me before this podcast started that this guy is on Critical Role, and I have never once listened to Critical Role or watched it in my life, so thank you for that one, Bill.
speaking of critical,
Yeah. Funny enough, he also plays Metal Bat in One Punch Man, so I see he's got
Yes.
an oofer here. And he plays Alphinaud in Final Fantasy XIV. He's played
Alphino.
Alphino.
Yeah,
Alphino?
it's French.
Oh, see,
Yeah, it's
Alphinaud.
Alphino. You would know this if you played.
He plays
Just saying.
Baguette Eiffel Tower in Final Fantasy XIV.
Wow.
He plays and he plays Phoenix Wright in most of the Ace Attorney things that have gotten an English dub, and he's also a number of characters in Star Wars: The Bad Batch.
Yeah, he's also a notable animation voice director. He did the voice direction for the DuckTales reboot.
One of our other main characters, we have Tsukiko Sagi. In Japanese, she was voiced by Mamiko Noto, who was Yukiko in JoJo. Diamond is Unbreakable, and Jin's daughter in Tokyo Godfathers. She was also Lancer. I do not remember how that's pronounced, so I'm not even going to try to attempt that. But yes, in the Fate series, and then in English,
I didn't want to put just Lancer, because that means
well,
nothing.
no, I know, because there's like that means nothing. And to
Yes.
most people, that still means nothing.
True, she's a Fate person.
So in English, Tsukiko is voiced by Michelle Ruff, who was Fujiko Mine in Lupin the Third, Yoko in Gurren Lagann, and Sinon in Sword Art Online.
That won't be the only time that another person that has played multiple roles in multiple Satoshi Kon things will show up. So. And next up, Maromi is voiced by Halko Momoi, who at the time was a pretty prolific idol singer, and she has gone on to be the voice of Ferris Nyan Nyan in Steins Gate, and she's also the lead character in Nurse Witch Komugi. She doesn't have a super massive credit list, but those were two of the big roles that I found that she had played. And in English, she is voiced by Carrie Savage, who is Cissnei in Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII, and she's also Raka in Haibane Renmei, and Madoka's cool mom in Madoka Magica.
Yeah. Okay, next up, Detective Maniwa was voiced in Japanese by Toshihiko Seki, who, that's great, was Duo Maxwell in Gundam Wing, and then Senketsu in Kill la Kill. And then in English, we have William Markham / Liam O'Brien, same actor, just credited differently, who voices Maniwa. He was Gaara in Naruto, Zabi in Mobile Suit Gundam The Origin, and Nephrite in the Viz dub of Sailor Moon.
This was the older detective in the series, right?
No, this is the younger one.
The young
That's
guy.
the younger
Gotcha,
one
gotcha.
that went down the rabbit hole.
Yes.
And, sidebar, Duo Maxwell is another perfect Gundam name.
Oh, of course. It's probably a lot of people's first Crazy Gundam name.
That is true.
The police chief, Keiichi Ikari, is voiced by Shozo Iizuka, who was Nappa and Android 8 in the Dragon Ball franchise, and he was the Japanese dub voice of Pazuzu in The Exorcist. So, nice to meet you. I played Pazuzu in The Exorcist. Nice to meet you. I played Pazuzu in The Exorcist. Imagine just introducing yourself that way. In English, he was voiced by Michael McConaughey, who was Charles Z. Britannia in Code Geass, the narrator in Hunter x Hunter 2011, and was the Count Cagliostro in the streamlined dub of The Castle of Cagliostro, the Lupin III movie.
Cool. And then playing the old woman, we have Hisako Kyoda. She was Genkai in Yu Yu Hakusho, the dub voice of the fairy godmother in Cinderella, and the granny in Looney Tunes, and apparently a ton of other old ladies. Seems like she gets typecasted, I guess. Mm-hmm. And then in English is Melora Hart. She is the wife of voice actor Steve Kramer, and she also played one of the psychic kids in Akira.
Yeah. Yeah, the Hisako Kyoda also played, I didn't write it down, but she played, I can't remember her name, she played the old woman in Inuyasha as well. I can't remember her name.
That's gonna bug me until I look it up. Hold on.
The old lady with the eye patch.
Lady something.
Lady something. Lady Inuyasha.
No.
Lady Yashahime.
Kaede.
Kaede, yes, thank you.
Yeah.
And then the old man in Japanese is voiced by Ryuji Saikachi, and he also played the old homeless man in Tokyo Godfathers, and he was the Japanese voice of Rafiki in all of the Lion King projects, and he passed away in 2017. And the old man in English was played by William Frederick Knight, who is 88 years old at the time of this recording and is still acting in anime to this day. I remember Tori and I were watching the dub of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Stone Ocean, and he shows up as the old man that Jolene has to fight in the prison, and I'm like, gosh, that guy sounds so familiar. And it was William Knight, and I'm like, that guy has sounded old since I started hearing him in anime, and I couldn't believe it.
Yes.
It's like he's 88 and still doing anime work.
The reason he sticks out to me is because he vaguely, at the right time, will sound like Brian Doyle Murray, which is the old man who voiced Captain Knuckles in Flapjack, that cartoon. And I thought it was him, and I confused the two of them very regularly. But they're different actors.
Oh, that's funny. It's a funny,
yes.
funny connection. But he actually started acting all the way back in the original Star Trek TV series. He was an extra in that. And probably to anime people, he is most well known as being the longtime voice of Daisuke Aramaki in Ghost in the Shell, who has been Aramaki for longer than Mary Elizabeth McGlynn has been the Major. So that tells you something. And he also played Professor Minovsky in Mobile Suit Gundam The Origin, and again he played the priest, like the cult leader priest in Akira. And the dub was directed by
I wonder if he's old enough to remember watching Paranoia Agent on Adult Swim.
Probably. He was pretty young back in 2004.
That's awesome. He's still voice acting. That's great.
Yeah.
How did he sound in the Stone Ocean dub? Because I haven't really heard the dub.
to me, he literally sounded no different than I remember him sounding in Standalone Complex.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, he's great. Like, if you guys have been watching Stone Ocean in Japanese, I highly recommend that dub, by the way. It's an excellent dub. It is probably the best dub that I've heard of the dubs that I've checked out from JoJo's so far. It's very good. But yes, the Paranoia Agent dub was directed by Jonathan Klein, who also directed Technolize, Ergo Proxy, and Haibane Renmei. So lots of dark,
Similar
vibey,
vibes.
yeah, dark, vibey Geneon properties of the early 2000s.
A lot of hard, kind of very heavy shows.
Definitely.
Not that that's a bad thing, but just like you're not watching those shows for like a happy laugh or like a comedy tone.
Just kind of like that period of time. You were in a post-Ava sort of depressive funk. You know, tons of shows had that really introspective, slow burn feel to them.
Definitely.
I would like to go back and do a revisit of Ergo Proxy because I remember really liking that when I watched it, and I thought it was the coolest thing ever that they used a Radiohead song as the ending.
Man, how do they afford that?
I don't know, but edgy teen me thought that was the coolest thing ever. Anyway, so some special performances that we wanted to note. Harumi Chono, which was the character...
I think you mean Maria.
Yes, I mean Maria. How could I forget? She wants to be free. Free, free. In Japanese, was voiced by Kotono Mitsuishi, the queen herself. You know, as Usagi in Sailor Moon, Misato in Eva, and of course Tai Yamada in Zombieland Saga, making the bank for just a simple grunt here and there. And then Taeko Hirokawa was voiced by Nana Mizuki. She's an extremely famous J-pop artist and just seiyuu in general. She did a lot of songs for Symphogear and Magical Girl Lyrical Nanoha. She was on in Persona 5, Cure Blossom, in Precure, Heartcatch Precure, Wrath and Fullmetal Alchemist, Hinata and Naruto, and she was also the dub voice of Katniss in the Hunger Games. So, a lot of cool titles under her belt for sure.
Do, 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 or however that thing goes.
I haven't seen the movie, I've only read the book, so I don't know.
What, they don't play that in the book?
No!
Maybe in the audiobook.
All right, so we've kind of talked around the show, but I guess going around the table, what did everyone think of this show, visiting it in the year of our Lord, 2022? I want to point... Well, we'll just go in order, so I'll just point at Tobias first. So what did you think of Paranoia Agent, revisiting it this time?
Well, this time, like I said earlier, I felt like this is the first time I really got the series. I was too focused initially on this is Japanese horror. This is different than what I'm used to. This is special. It's different. It's more of a slow burn, and there are ghosts that are different. And while I got the fact that it's about like basically memetic information and that sort of mania, I didn't really like make a lot of the connections I feel like I should have because I was too focused on it being it's weird, man. They got the weird music and the weird ending. It's supposed to be creepy, and I think
Weird
I was too
opening.
preoccupied with that. But I think I really got it this time. I really enjoyed it. I think we can talk about the issues with it in a little bit, but overall, yeah, I dug it. Good show, man.
Bill, what did you think?
Overall, I liked it. I think I liked more of the individual stories than the overall arc of the show. I think the individual stories are where this show's real strength is. I don't really get the idea of it being a ghost story. It's more to me like kind of a psychological evaluation of these individuals and their fears and anxieties and inner demons and their flaws that each of them face. And I guess my only criticism, and it's I mean this in a light way, but the show doesn't look the best in the world, but it is an early 2000s digital show. Like they said in their Q&A, on the bonus features that this is the first kind of all digital show that Kon had done at the time. And so because of that, it's not the most crispest, prettiest show in the world to look at. But overall, I dug it.
Tori?
I will share that sentiment. I was lazy and didn't watch my Blu-ray, so I just watched it on streaming, and the quality difference between my television and my computer screen was night and day. But overall, it really held up for me. It was kind of like another revisit, essentially, like a fresh revisit, and I had forgotten just enough of the small, fine details. Like, I could remember the big picture, but like the small details of how we got to certain plot points were kind of fuzzy for me, so kind of like rediscovering that was really cool. I'm happy that my favorite episodes definitely are still my favorite episodes, and a few things have definitely hit me different now, and I will be excited to kind of talk about that when we get into more in-depth discussion. But no, I'm so happy that this is just as good as I remembered it being.
Yeah, not to harp on it too hard, but I also noticed the thing about the visual fidelity, and this definitely, like, I was watching it on my Blu-ray the whole time, and I was just like, dang, well, this upscale didn't really do any favors for this show, because it still looks kind of like a DVD. So maybe if I had dug out my CRT TV and plugged in a DVD player, it would have looked like the most crisp and clean thing. But
yes.
Yeah, it's not a great looking show, but again, that's only a small part of it, the overall piece. I wouldn't knock it too many points just for that.
No, can I backtrack 2 seconds?
Yeah, go for it.
Bill
Only
said
2
it
seconds.
Bill said it didn't remind him of a ghost story, but I laugh because the last couple episodes I was watching, especially the one that I want to point out later, it was just straight up reminding me of Candyman, where more so not a ghost, but like an urban legend and the way information spreads. And I don't know, I guess because maybe I've just so recently rewatched Candyman, but that kind of was in the back of my mind of like, haha, like, Little Slugger's like Candyman, that's cool.
Oh yeah,
So.
that's absolutely what the show's about.
Mm-hmm.
The ghosts are the paranoid agents that we are ourselves along the way.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's a ghost story in the sense that, like, the ghost is, like, the thing within us that we can't accept or something like that. And it just haunts us in that regard. It's like a different kind of haunting rather than, like, a malevolent spirit. But I guess in a way, it's like you're kind of creating the malevolent spirit within yourself whenever you've got, you know, these, like, regrets or these things that you can't let go of or take responsibility for or what have you. And that's generally the whole thesis statement of the show. But
Right, and you give it power if you acknowledge it in the unhealthy way.
right, or refuse to acknowledge it and whatnot.
Yeah.
But I guess just for me, broadly speaking, I did like it. I don't think I wasn't really blown away in kind of like a shock and awe sense that I have been towards other Satoshi Kon works. And I think I lay part of that blame, again, on the visuals, because it's not his most visually creative work. You know, outside of the fidelity, I don't think that really applies here necessarily, but it's a lot more utilitarian in its visual aesthetic. I mean, you definitely still have those iconic, like, Satoshi Kon flares of the way that he does like jump cuts, and like you don't know what you're looking at until like the camera pulls out and you see that you're actually looking on a TV screen, or there's like these match cuts that he uses a lot to do scene transitions. Like, all of that's still there, but it's not quite as concentrated and like beating you over the head with it as he does in other works, which I guess is ironic in a way I don't need to explain.
Well, I think what also is the reason why the fidelity isn't so good is because of their very tight deadlines. Like they talked about in the audio commentaries, that they were under immense deadlines to get stuff done, where they were using previous assets. Like in the opening sequence, they reused one of the background shots, I think, of the subway from Tokyo Godfathers in the Paranoia Agent opening. And they talked about how for the opening, they had 1 week to do key animation drawing, and then another week
Wow.
to do all the filming process, and that the opening sequence has less than 100 cells in the opening. So they tried to keep things simple and as quick as they could, because they were coming. Most of the staff that worked on Paranoia Agent were coming from the movie side of things. So I have to applaud them for having to meet these tough deadlines, because in a movie you have a bit more time to add more flourish to visuals and have a little more panache. Whereas in TV series, unless you're given a long lead time, you have deadlines you got to meet, and so there are corners that are cut and and compromises that have to be made.
Well, I'll say that their effort on the opening, even under tight conditions, paid off in spades, because I mean, I'm getting ahead of myself, but if I could use the opening as like my one iconic scene from the whole thing that I would pick, I easily would, even though I won't, but I would.
It's funny you mentioned that there's only 100 cells, because it really is just looping animation of them laughing. So I can see how it saves a lot of time. It doesn't look like it does, because the backgrounds, like the mushroom cloud and all that, like it looks wild, but those are all still frames. It's just the laughing animation that is really animated. It's kind of funny. I never would have considered that. I guess to go back to Austin's point though, yeah, like in retrospect, I can see why it's not as cool, like wild as something like parts of Perfect Blue or later Paprika. But I think what really makes this work and still feel really wild to me is just the music. Like I can't really understate how as important as Kon is to the DNA of Paranoia Agent, so much of the music just adds to that creepiness, man. Even beyond the opening and the ending, which are wild in themselves. Like the interstitial music is just it's genuinely creepy, man. Like just creeps me out listening to the music, and that adds to the suspense and the tension. Like we don't know what Little Slugger is. Is he a person? Is he a human? Is he a ghost? Is he literally just a figment of Tsukiko's imagination? The music really puts you on edge in a great way.
Mm-hmm. And one thing I think that also adds to that feeling of anxiety as well is the interstitial, like what do you call it, the eye catches that would go to commercials, where they're all like sketchy and you're hearing that like staticky sound in your head. I think that, that right there, like no matter which episode it is, like if something super stressful is going on or something a little bit lighter, those always remind you that, something spooky, scary is kind of like just around the corner, or something that's going to give you a existential crisis.
Very sinister.
Yeah.
And while we can talk about the show whether it is or is not a ghost story, like the reason it came to the conclusion is that it is framed as a horror, as a thriller story. Whether or not you consider it that, that's definitely the vibes Kon is going for to some degree, and that's backed up with the music, with those eye catches, for instance, and the way things are framed.
I don't think there's any question that that's exactly what he was going for. I mean, he was kind of using the medium of horror and thriller in a way to tell some sort of broad social commentary, which is again kind of a hallmark of all of his works. Like he's generally a quite thoughtful creator, in the sense that he throughout most of his works he wanted to signal something more about like a universal truth than just making cool cartoons, even though he is also very good at just making cool cartoons.
I guess the only other thing to talk about the visuals is that I guess you just kind of have to like understand that's where we were at the time.
Yeah.
Beforehand, when these were actually cells being put on film, all those are really easy to like remaster and make look to remake them in a way that looks good on like 1080p or 4K or what have you. But there's that awkward period in the early 2000s, which Paranoia Agent is smack dab in the middle of, where they were doing digital work for standard definition TV. And what you get is flat faces, thick lines, really awful looking people. And there's really not much you can do with standard like remastering technology. There's just, unfortunately, it's just a part of that era where you kind of have to put up with that. There's really not much you can do.
And
It
it's
gives it a
fine.
certain, yeah, it gives it a certain character, though, I think. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Oh yeah, for sure. It definitely is nostalgic in a way. Absolutely.
Yes.
This was a couple years later, but always watching stuff from this particular era always reminds me of the first time I watched Death Note, which also has kind of that same feeling, even though Death Note I think is a little bit more visually sophisticated, but it still has that very like early digital animation, like we're capped at 480p and making it any bigger is just stretching it kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, I guess one thing that's kind of interesting about this show that I mean I don't really know that I had really any expectations going in other than like this is Satoshi Kon and it's about some paranoid agents and a kid with a bat. I really didn't have any expectations going in, but one thing that I was fascinated by is the general story structure. So like we start off and in the first episode our POV character for at least that episode with Sagi is, attacked by Little Slugger. And then that's sort of the inciting incident for the rest of the show. And then we spend a few episodes following the detectives who are trying to find out the situation behind Sagi's case and follow up on this assailant named Little Slugger, while we also follow other people who also get attacked by Little Slugger. And then the show kind of puts itself on pause for a minute and we do some like side story episodes, and then we come back to the end with this sort of big bombastic finale. And I don't know what I expected, but I didn't expect that. So what do you guys think about the broad structure of the way that this show plays out?
It is definitely an anthology series for sure. I think we mentioned way back at the beginning that these were all sort of half-formed ideas that Khan didn't have exactly. He didn't have a full movie in Paranoia Agent, but he had a couple different stories he wanted to tell. It absolutely shows. Like he could have possibly did a movie of the central Tsukiko Maromi story, but so much of the other little things like the three ghosts and like the what etc. The one episode with the housewives that are gossiping. There's so many little stories that sort of add together.
The audacity to do an anthology in an anthology, by the way.
that is true.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it works. It is certainly a little different. The only other anthological thing he had done was, like Bill mentioned earlier, Memories, but that doesn't really quite count since he owns like one part.
Yeah.
And it's distinct. All of Khan's small work are distinct in their own particular ways. Paranoia Agent, even if it doesn't necessarily hold up in fidelity, visual fidelity, I think it holds up in other ways, and this is certainly one of them.
Its story structure it kind of reminds me of Kaiba in a way. You can go back to that episode where there is an overarching story, but at least in the early parts of Kaiba, those stories are very about the individual situation that the main characters are in. And it's kind of the same way with Paranoia Agent, where in one episode we'll focus on this kid who's the most popular kid in school and him dealing with the ramifications of being seen as potentially shonen bad, or another episode where we will deal with three people that want to end their lives, and how that episode is very much like a black comedy. And it's kind of funny because that's the way they initially planned it, where the main story was they had about like 7 episodes that would make up the main story, and then 3 episodes that they were going to do as like little side stories, and then I guess the remainder was going to be the finale, is how they came out to structure it. But
Right.
no, I like the structure a lot because like I've talked about in my anthologies panel, when you have a limited amount of time, that forces you to be more creative in your storytelling. So, and in each of these stories, we explore different aspects of these people and their flaws, or kind of their dark underbelly that they're dealing with. And it's like a little mini play. with each of these individual stories that I really grew to like a lot.
So I guess going off of in that regard, sort of like what stories within this broader story really stood out to you guys the most? Like, I think one that we could probably all agree with that is very striking because of how different it is from everything else is, of course, like the side story with the suicide pact. And again, I don't know that much about this, but it's been my general understanding that like online suicide pacts were kind of a thing in Japan for a while. Like,
Yep.
if you guys remember Welcome to the NHK, like that anime series and light novel series that it's based on, they have a whole arc about that too. And that was from a similar time period as Paranoia Agent. So I think that was just kind of a thing that was going on in Japan. And I definitely think that episode was really interesting now because like you don't really see much modern anime like talk about this thing much anymore, but that was a thing for a minute. So I think that story really stands out. But what do you guys think of, sort of beyond that one?
I think for me, the other one that is my favorite episode just because it's very it's a dark comedy, right? Like Bill said.
Yeah.
That one always stuck with me. And then you slowly realize, and then the girl at the end is just like, I don't want to be alone. And I'm like, okay, we've all been there. But that one, the one with the housewives gossiping, like when I think of this show, for some reason, that's like the iconic episode for me. Because it just says so much about like the way Japanese society kind of works and like how, people chat amongst each other. And I mean, it's not like specific to them, but just kind of society as in general. And then I think with this rewatch, not necessarily the episode, but the scene that stuck out to me was the detective's wife, and she was telling her story, and like Little Slugger kept getting bigger and bigger in front of her, but she's like, I won't, let you do this to me, and I'm choosing to, no longer feel like I want to die, and things like that. And I don't know, that stuck with me real like a lot this time. So
yeah, I think that particular I think that particular episode is kind of like, oh, this is what the show is about, the scene, in a way.
Yes, exactly, right.
Or like this is like, because I think the ending is a little bit depressing, but that particular scene is kind of like, well, this is the positive takeaway from the show right here, like very much on display. So yeah, that really stood out to me too. It's just like, oh, Little Slugger is the things that you let destroy you, but if you don't let those things destroy you, then Little Slugger can't hit you with his bat.
Right, like, broke me first time watching this. Damn, I really need Little Slugger to take one and, like, knock me out. Woke me now is like, no, I'm good, actually. Thank you.
I guess it is interesting, Oh, go ahead.
No, finish your thought.
Yeah, I was like, well, Little Slugger's his kind of purpose kind of grows with the show, and like his intensity grows with the show, because like in the very beginning, like I mean, we find out details later that kind of contradict this, but like when he assaults Sagi, it's just like, oh, he hits her and breaks her leg or something, but like by the end of the show, he's just like turning into a monster and just like killing entire swaths of the Tokyo City block. So it's kind of, he grows in intensity, as the show progresses, to sort of show like, both the narrative escalation and the fact that like, oh, society is like on this negative track where, all of its worst elements are just keep getting worse and worse until it like eats itself. But
so when we look at like the show, we talked about the anthology aspect, but so much of the first half is pretty much telling one story. And once a certain character dies and they realize things aren't quite what they seem, the show does a couple different episodes like The Gossip, like The Detective's Wife, where it doesn't really matter so much if Little Slugger is one person. It's building on the idea of being cornered. And let's look at different people that are also cornered, that are not necessarily the people we've been following in the story the whole time. The Detective's Wife episode was great. I loved that. I loved a lot of those parts where we see the detective himself.
Yeah.
as he is working his little dead-end security job, and he like meets the guy that he put in jail, the robber that he put in jail, and he starts to fall into the trap of nostalgia and burying himself in this the old way, back when he was a kid, how the world was so much simpler, and the police and the relationship that the police have with criminals was so much simpler than anything else. I really liked those scenes in particular.
Yeah, like he has
I,
that
I really
monologue where he talks about, whenever I was a kid, I thought it was just, the robbers with the what was it, the burlap sacks, and I was just gonna
Exactly.
and I was gonna chase them down and rescue them and get applause from everybody, but in real life it just doesn't work out that way.
I really like the anime episode too. I generally don't like those kind of episodes. They seem to be a little like navel gazy. Like, here we're making an anime about anime, and let's kind of make in jokes and stuff. Like, it's been played out. Shirobaka did it well. I know this came before, but it's not generally my favorite episodes. However, I really liked how this felt almost like a serial murder mystery. When every time this guy disappoints somebody and they freak out, they suddenly die, and how the episode just kind of, well, they didn't report to work today, and there's a little sign on the desk that says "Don't look for me." Right. Really kind of eerie in that sort of serial killer sort of way.
And that was great too, because it had that through line where, in this, while Little Slugger is getting more intense in his ability to maim and kill, at the same time, the character Moromi is also getting more and more and more and more popular. And then sort of both of those things literally collide into each other in the finale episode. But, episode 10, where they're making the Moromi cartoon, is sort of, it's like they're making that cartoon about this character that people really love. But you're seeing like all this internal strife and turmoil and pain and literally death that goes into making, an anime project like this. And of course this is exaggerated, but is it really? Because the anime industry is pretty brutal in that regard. So I definitely think there was some commentary going on there as well.
For sure.
I think the two episodes that stuck with me, and just the theme that really stuck with me with the show, is this kind of that I grew to like the individual episodes more than the overall mystery of Little Slugger, where to the end I was kind of like, I don't really care about that. I more cared about the individual stories, just because they were really interesting little plays. But just the show can get really dark at points. Like the darkest episodes that stuck out to me was one with the kid who, at first you think he's really nice. He's Mr. Popular. Everyone in the school loves him. But then, because he wears golden skates, he is suspected to be Little Slugger. And then he just becomes so desperate to maintain his status and to maintain his high totem pole, where he is just really mean and really cruel to this kid that is not in the best of shape, even though that kid who's overweight is actually really kind and is trying to be supportive, and because his imagination goes wild with fear and speculation, he becomes irrational in his thinking and just is desperate to maintain his perch. Or the other one that was probably the darkest, which I'm surprised they got away with, was the friend of the police detective, the main one, who you think like, oh, he really cares about his family, he really cares about his daughter, but then you later learn like, oh no, he works for the mob to initially for a good goal of getting money for his family, but then he kind of became a lech, enjoying the higher things of life, to where at some point we think we see that he set up invasive video cameras of his daughter, which is completely gross. And I just like, wow, I can't believe he did that. And it's a weird subversion of what we initially think of him, and it's just like a darker, more evil or flip side of
Yeah, I'm glad you.
when
I'm glad you
we
brought.
first meet when we first
Yeah.
meet him.
I'm really glad you brought that episode up because I definitely think that was probably the darkest point in the whole show, and
Oh yeah.
yeah, because that episode was like just so heartbreaking because like out of all the characters that because there's also the other big theme in this show about like taking responsibility for your life and not blaming other people on your problems, but like that's the one where it's like pretty clear that it's kind of the complete opposite. Like I think the whole what pushed her into the corner thing is that she wanted to jump off the bridge and kill herself because of all those horrible things that she found out that her dad was doing, and I'm just like, well, I guess that's kind of that's like the Little Slugger angle that they have there, but like I don't think there's anything ambiguous about like there was nothing that she was doing wrong there. It's just like her
No,
her
she was
misery.
completely innocent.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. It's like she was just a completely innocent victim of her dad's like horrible actions that drove her to want to kill herself, which is really
And
heartbreaking.
the resolution of that, it matches that. The other characters, when they get hit by Little Slugger, like Tsukiko, when she gets hit, she's absolved from she's the victim now. She's not she's excused from work duties for a bit. She's
Right.
freed from her from the issue at hand. But in Taiko's case, she forgets. She's
Yes.
completely empty, and like that's what it was. Like she put having that knowledge that this was going on, the horror of that situation, the fact that she couldn't go back to this home that was this monolithic thing that her father and her family had worked toward, that everything was built on a lie. The only way out of that was just to completely forget. And that's what happens. Like they go completely amnesia. And I think that's kind of interesting to see the way her dad sits there with her after that. Like you don't know if she's going to remember that or have the memories come back. So like where does he at? Does he really get to escape from the personal hell that he made by having this fear of this amnesiac daughter?
Well, I do like that. From what I remember of that episode, is he faces the consequences of his actions, where this one mob guy is like just keeps raising the debt on him that he has to pay off because you've been enjoying the finer things and going to strip clubs off this deal, and now it's time to pay up. And then later, the house that's the monolith of this symbol gets destroyed after it's almost nearly complete. So the symbol of his
Ooh, yes.
by
of
like a
his-
landslide or something, right?
there's
Yeah,
like a
she's on the bridge, right? And she's like, I just want it all to disappear, and then like it cuts to the house getting destroyed. Am I remembering
Right.
that correctly?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think so.
That's
Something like that. Yeah. That must have been. Oh, that was really good. I like that.
So yeah, I do like that because they could have gone even darker and let him just escape at the end, but no, he faced comeuppance for his horrible actions as the episode progressed.
True. I thought it was an interesting self-callback because I wrote this down specifically in my notes that whenever Tayako, comes out of being, in her coma, she looks at her dad and she says, "Excuse me, who are you?" Which I'm sure
Yes.
Satoshi Kon intended to be a nod back to Perfect Blue, because that's like the line that Mima in Perfect Blue has to say in like her first acting gig. Like she says it over and over and over again. So I'm sure that was a fun little callback there.
All right, now I wanna ask one thing that kind of you brought up in the notes.
Yeah, let's
is
do it.
the puzzle box aspect of the mystery of the show. And people kind of have a love-hate relationship with a puzzle box format because it's a big mystery, and as the show progresses, it gives you hints, and some people are like desperate to like, I want to know the answers, give me the answers, and then at some shows can execute that very well. Some shows have a history or are notorious for failing, like in like the last 20 years. Probably Lost, if anyone remembers that show, is probably the biggest.
Does anyone remember Lost?
Real Lost hours up in here, boys.
Yeah, I think it is interesting, like the puzzle box nature of it, I guess, because I guess at first glance, you know, the first like arc, you could say it's like, it feels like it's very much going to be like a police procedural, like we're specifically going to follow these cops, you know, trying to track down Little Slugger. And like as I was watching those episodes, I was just like, I don't know if I really want this show to be like a police procedural necessarily. But then I'm glad that it kind of subverted that and it ended up not being that. It's just like the cops ended up being like not our main POV characters, but just like, you know, actors on this stage along with everyone else. Like they're not in control. They're sort of like, you know, victims of, you know, the Little Slugger mania, rather than being sort of the third party, just sort of investigative perspective, trying to track down who he is and what he wants. So I enjoyed that subversion, but I guess for some people, maybe if they don't like things being subverted, they might not like that. But people that don't like that are probably not going to watch the show
Marvel
anyway.
movie watchers.
I'm gonna say with puzzle box shows is just like, you don't want all the answers. And I love this quote from the audio commentary thing. Is in the first episode they talk about how people were how fans were analyzing the show and like analyzing the opening, and Khan says they will never get an answer no matter how hard they try to analyze it.
Well, good.
And
you
even
should never hand it to them.
Even creators of puzzle box formats of shows or movies don't always know the answers. It's always just like, it's how you interpret the answer.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I mean, as far as I see it, the aspect of the show that's a puzzle box, if we hyper focus on this particular thing, Paranoia Agent is not good at this. I do not come to the show for a lost sort of, you know, what's going on here? What's really happening? Mm-mm. It really keys off when the boy dies. Yeah. And Little Slugger's still going on, and then the episodes after kind of they're more like an anthology thing. It's obvious that's not really where the series is doing. Mm-mm. And the way that it ends with there are these big ghosts, you know, Little Slugger, this big old black blob, and Moromi, you know, it's I know that yes, in canon, in story, that all happened because they reference it in the ending scene, but I don't really consider that real. And that's not really what the show is about. So it's funny to hear you talk about Khan almost like taunting these type of people that love this type of show. You know, you're never going to understand it. Well, no shit, because there's nothing to understand. Like, it is cut and dry. It is about responsibility and escapism and all that other stuff. It doesn't matter. But Little Slugger is or isn't. But
Tobias, nerds overanalyze and overthink, and this show probably would cause, if you first saw it, they're probably overanalyzing and overthinking every little minutia that's happening when it really doesn't mean anything. So
I mean, I'm sure, but like I don't really feel like this ties in the same way other series would. Go ahead.
Yeah, I personally would love to have a 30-minute side tangent conversation about the Christian symbolism in Evangelion, please.
Oh, it's extremely important.
In the Paranoia Agent episode, yes.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing too.
Eva at least gives you a bunch of stuff that sure that's not the best way to read it, but like there's enough little, you know, ticky tack, little crunchy stuff in Eva that you could go down that path. Yeah. That does not exist in Paranoia Agent outside of the first like few episodes. Like
I think. Oh, go ahead. Finish.
I was just gonna say, if you came to the show with that impression. The point where the boy dies, that was the death knell to the show making sense in the traditional sense, in a literal sense.
Right, and I don't think this show is like super deep. Like it definitely requires a little bit of, I guess, advanced media literacy. Like, of course, like, you want to think outside the box. Like, it's definitely not like a bare surface level show. There are things to be thought about here, but this show isn't like the pinnacle of that. Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense? Yeah.
If you have the understanding, probably most people that would watch this show probably do, but if you have the understanding that, like, sometimes art and stories are intended to deliver themes rather than, like, plot-based stories, then I think you'll be fine here. Because, like, it perfectly outlines what the show is about, even if, like, you don't know what Little Slugger really is at the end of the day. It's just like, well, yeah, you do. You can understand what Little Slugger is. Like, it's a symbol.
Right, and it's not so confusing that I think the show would be a turnoff to a person.
Yeah.
Because if you just sit and, like, take in the context of everything else and think about it for, like, 0.5 seconds longer than you might have to start with, it's pretty straightforward what it's doing. I don't think it's like, ooh, we have to write, like, 30-page dissertations on it or anything. But that's not a knock either. Like...
Oh, for sure, yeah.
For all of you out there that have written 30-page dissertations on Paranoia Agent, we love you. Thank you for your work.
Yes. I would love to read them. Please send them to me.
I think there's enough meat here where you could talk about what it's saying. It's just not a matter of a puzzle box format. This is what I'm saying. It's a good show. It's no Lost, and it's not really trying to be Lost. I can see where the type of people that like this type of thing could try to force that format on it. But you're going to be dissatisfied. And once I realized that it wasn't that, I didn't really turn my brain off. I turned that part of my brain off,
And
well, let's put it in an example our audience would understand. It's no Higurashi where you spend one whole season trying to figure out what the hell's happening and then have to watch a whole second season to actually sort of get answers to everything that's happening in the first season.
It was about the cicadas that cried along the way.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, there's definitely a couple things here that I think that, my limited personal understanding probably could be more enriched by people that know more than I do. Like what things is this tapping into in Japanese society that maybe we as, American Westerners in 2022 just miss? Just by, like, having not been there and not grown up in that culture. Like, that would be really interesting to learn.
Interject. I will say, kind of piggybacking off of what you just said, one big thing that I notice is a miss in this show is that there are no translations of a lot of the text in the background that provides very important context clues to what is happening in the story. So I would like to shout out Google Lens for pulling me through several of these episodes, because you are missing so much of the story by not getting what is in those, like, web posts and newspaper articles and things like that. So slight tangent, but sort of related.
Well, do you have any examples? I would love to
the suicide episode.
The suicide episode, I literally had to play 5 seconds pause, and, like, I could read very little of it, not enough to actually understand the full sentence. So I was, like, pausing, opening Google Lens with its, like, shoddy translation, but I was like, oh, okay, they're talking about, like, using the barbecue smoke. Okay, yes, that's a very popular method of suicide in certain places. Okay, cool. And then they cut to that next. So, like, but you're still missing, like, the suicide one was a big one because one of the users was basically, like, walking them through the different methods of ending their lives, and, like, that's kind of important to the story, right?
Follow up to that, I will say, since I know you were watching it on Crunchyroll, the Funimation Blu-ray subtitles do have that. It may not be
cool.
It may not be for everything, but I distinctly remember having no trouble. Like, they subtitled all of the chat room instant messages. On the Funimation Blu-ray. So I will say that if that's not on Crunchyroll, then that's a big problem, and they should fix that immediately.
No, it isn't. The dub, and listen, I gotta get on my soapbox because I complain about this all the time. There are no dub titles on the English dub on Crunchyroll, so I'm, like, literally TV up to 50 and like they'll be speaking really quietly, and then like the next scene is like some really loud noise. It was terrible. Like, I hate that. More places need to be better about that, because it's just like, I don't know, frustrating.
Twitter clapping emoji. Normalize dub titles.
Thank you.
Yes. Because I'm a big dub liker, and I also like to watch things with subtitles, but anime is the worst of all, in that most of the time they only have one subtitle option, and it's the Japanese subs, and sometimes, looking at you, Sentai, you cannot even put on both at the same time if you're playing off of the disc, because for some reason the video file with the subtitles is burned in, and the video file without it is not, and it's very frustrating. But anyway, I digress. Another thing that accessibility. Another thing that I think would be interesting to learn about from somebody that's smarter than me is like the connections back to kind of like World War II, because you know the vision of the mushroom cloud has like a very distinct meaning to the people of Japan for reasons that hopefully should be obvious, and that's a big sort of motif in the opening. And then the police chief has that, you know, one-off comment at the last episode of like seeing the ravaged town, you know, after the big Moromi / Little Slugger monsoon or whatever, and he makes that note about like, oh, this is just like what it was like after the war. And I'm just like, is there more World War II commentary in here that maybe I'm missing because I don't know? That would be something interesting to look into further.
I think Kon brought that up in the Q&A that's on the Blu-ray.
Oh, really? So are you saying that we should watch the Q&A that's on the Blu-ray that you've mentioned many times?
Well, yes, Austin. I'm saying you should look at the bonus features because it gives you a lot of context.
Wow, William.
So we're gonna have we're gonna have an affiliate link to the Amazon store in the show notes, right? We can make some money off Bill.
Amazon, please. This is a Right Stuff household.
Does Right Stuff? Do we have a Right Stuff affiliate? If not,
Probably
Right Stuff, Crunchyroll, Sony, whoever.
We're listening. You've got enough money.
Before we got on like 3 or 4 different tangents, you talked about how does Paranoia Agent, what does that hold up in a 2022 American audience? And I emphatically say yes.
Ooh, same.
I agree.
Because one of the things that really stood out to me, I think that I heard, if you haven't been listening to the Matt Alt, Patrick Macias podcast, Pure Tokyoscope, you should do that because one of the first things he mentions, Matt Alt wrote the book Pure Invention maybe like a year or 2 ago. And he mentions sort of the central thesis of his work is the fact that when we talk about Japanese culture, they are not different than us. They are merely ahead of us. That if you look at, you know, Japan and Japanese culture of 10, 15, 20 years ago, that's where we're at now. They're not different. They're just ahead of the curve. And so much of what we see here with, I mean, you have to compare this not only to like Hello Kitty, Moromi to Hello Kitty, but Moromi to like idol culture in general. I couldn't help but think.
Don't you dare say Funko Pops.
No, I was going to say if Paranoia Agent were made today, you know who Moromi would be?
Who's that?
Moromi would be Miku Hatsune.
You leave her out of this.
I thought
No. Miku is exactly what Moromi is, a non-character.
No.
Miku, no, I'm going to go down this path because this is what I find so weirdly fascinating about Miku. Miku is an instrument. However, over the past, 15 years of her existence, she's been made into a goddess. 100 years from now, when archaeologists are unearthing the remains of America or even Japan, and they, unearth our technology and our documents, they're going to see characters like Miku, and they're going to think that we worshipped her as a goddess. Yeah. And I'm not joking about that. I'm dead fucking serious. Like, we talk about idol culture flippantly and how this or that, but it is wildly fascinating that we actually treat these people, these characters, these what have you, as actual religious idols. And that is what the center of this show is talking about. Moromi is not just a little dog. Moromi is a figure that people dump their anxieties and their fears onto. Moromi is a comfort to these people. And that's what we see in the last few episodes, where Moromi suddenly becomes really huge, and suddenly people are like robbing stores with Moromi merchandise. And I think there's like an interview with a couple girls that are just like, all we care about is Moromi. That's all we care about. And you mentioned earlier that Moromi is the opposite, the other side of the coin to Little Slugger. And that is exactly what this show is trying to say. If Moromi is this balm for the masses, then Little Slugger is both this evil, devilish, satanic force, but also is frees people. It is also what Little Slugger also does what Moromi does, and that it frees people from this responsibility. And that's just so fascinating that we see that happen. Yeah. This is Japan in the 2020s, the 2000s. This is where we're at now. We have these figures. I mean, hell, like, let's be honest, that's what Donald Trump was. Like, nobody gives a shit about what Donald Trump actually was saying. He was a figurehead to people, and people could dump their anxieties, whether we say their anxieties are racist and awful and terrible, which they were, but whether or not that's true, they still had anxieties, and they were dumping them as on what these political figures are doing.
And there's something to be said about nostalgia there too, with Paranoia Agent, and sort of the appeal of Trump in his time. It's just like he was appealing to people that were specifically nostalgic for sort of this, in their minds, a more idyllic country, rather than facing the fears and anxieties that they have about the modern day. And that's sort of what he took advantage of in a negative sense, to sort of rise to power.
Well, to a larger, to continue down the tangent road, Moromi is a parasocial, and I've used the word, the parasocial relationship, where people glom onto a personality, a figure that really has no personality. Or if they do have a personality, they only show you certain aspects of their personality. And that could be with like an online following, whether that be a YouTube person or a VTuber.
I mean, I'm telling you, man, I've gone beyond. Like, VTubing was kind of cute when Kizuna I was doing it, and in the first wave, I'm actually kind of freaked out by VTubing now, man. I'll put that out there, because the way I've seen people actually literally like watch VTubers constantly and like know the lore and donate to them, that is exactly what Moromi is, like, on the dot. And it is, I kind of get it, because we're in a fucked up time, like in 2020 and the pandemic and all that other stuff. I'm not going to blame people for finding their escapism where they need it, but it is in the back of my mind extremely worrying to see this sort of behavior extend to people and fake people.
But at least with Miku, right, she's a blank canvas, and that's what so many creators use her for. They make all these different versions of her, so like at least they're doing something creative with it, I guess, rather than just weirdly funneling money into somebody who's actually hiding behind an avatar. I don't know, but
using Vocaloid is go ahead.
Hey, and these VTubers haven't performed on David Letterman like Miku did.
Yes, exactly. Like, I'm about to go run and cover the ears of all my little Miku figures. Like, don't listen, he doesn't mean it.
Well, I mean, like, as a creative thing, like, that's fine. Like, the people that do VTubing, those are real people, and that's how they make their money. And like, Twitch sucks. We can go on a whole thing about Twitch and sexism and all that stuff. And if that's how a group of women are making money, then hell yes, make that bank. I hate the fact that it's had to come to that in a lot of ways, but do what you need to do. And I appreciate the fact that Vocaloid is an instrument. It's a canvas that people can use to make music, but just the sort of like, Miku's not real. Like,
no,
but
she's real in my heart.
Well, the way that people talk about her songs as if she did it, like, no, like, there are other real people that made the songs. They're using her. You don't say this is a song by Trumpet. Trumpet didn't make the song. Miku is a trumpet. That's really what it is. And it's fine. Like, again, I have no problem with Miku as she exists, but the way that people treat her as a real person, that's what kind of freaks me out. And that's what we're seeing here in Paranoia Agent.
Now,
you're worried about that line of just like, it's not just an entertainment product, it's something more personable and more emotionally connected.
And before
Exactly, yeah.
before I cut off this train of thought to pivot to the end, I will say we don't worship Miku because she's got a nice design and she makes cool music, whatever. We do it because she invented Minecraft. There we go, checkmate.
Exactly. But see, I can pivot it back because they also do kind of make more commentary about that in the show. I mean, there was that like otaku guy who was making all those figures, and he had to like have those figures watching him do whatever it was that he did, and like lived vicariously through those figures and things like that.
Absolutely.
So yes, that was weird.
That was a weird
where
episode.
they had the policeman that goes down the rabbit hole where each of the figures like something out of like a 70s show where one heals him as like a sexy nurse, and another one is the tech person that gives him like some information, and it's kind of a weird blending of just like your like what Satoshi Kon does really well, of just that blending of reality and fantasy of like, do you have are you really talking to these people, or is this all just in your head and you have this fake relationship with these figures that have no personalities whatsoever?
Oh, it's absolutely a manner of escapism, and Khan knew the otaku subculture back then, and that's only increased now. Japan and worldwide. America, we actually have an otaku subculture, whether you call it otaku or incel or whatever buzzword we've got now. Like, it's still a fantasy that we're living in that people cannot escape from. And fantasy can be great. It can be that balm that we need to relieve stress, but there are lines that get crossed, and here it is. He has these figures that he treats as reality. We see the detective as he's like a ham radio guy, and the idea of hearing information and sharing information feels very much like a proto internet addict, where he's so obsessed with being connected with other people. All these characters have fantasies they live in, and they refuse to accept that and come back to the real world.
Yeah, the finale where Moroni presents our two main leads, like, you can live in this fake reality and it's your world, you can just live in it. And when the main cop finds out that his wife is dying, he just says, no, I can't live in this fake world anymore. I have to accept reality because that is what's happening, and I have to be the one person that's been with me through thick and thin, and stick with her, because if I abandon her to live in this fantasy land, then what am I admitting to myself?
Especially because he encouraged her not to do that. So
Right.
Exactly.
yeah.
And there's a lot to be said, about general broad otaku stuff as well, but we could also have a conversation here about like, a lot of the way that Little Slugger sort of increased in his power and his popularity is the fact that like everybody through the media cycle and through like gossip and etc. like that, they could not stop talking about Little Slugger and like his influence and his crimes and etc. etc. And there's something to be said about our fascination with true crime, but I won't have that conversation today.
Do not get me on that soapbox, because boy, am I still pissed.
I've already attacked Miku. Let's not.
I know. Don't.
No,
you're gonna see a side of me you're not gonna like.
No, this is not about attacking anyone or whatever. It's just like, it's all about balance, and all these ways that we distract ourselves from the modern world or the things that we've got to do. It's like, they're not inherently bad so long as they don't take over your life. Thank you. Goodbye.
Exactly.
Yes.
And so much of this is like mania. I keep getting mania, and the ending is everybody, not just our main principals, but everybody in the setting is suddenly overcome with Moromi fever and Little Slugger fear. That it's mania. It's the same tulip mania stuff, just in a different aspect. Suddenly these fears are so palpable that they become real, and whether they are literally real, like as happened in Paranoia Agent, are just so socially affecting as they can be in the real life. It's back before memes were a thing, before they became really popular. Like the word meme means something. It is a repeated idea, not just a funny picture with impact font that you share with your Discord and internet friends. Like, this show is about memes and how virality and how they can spread. And I think, again, for a show coming out in 2005, very easily touches upon where we're at now as a culture, as a society.
Honestly.
Well, and also a lot of the stuff that's the basis of paranoia is the basis of like the modern internet. Like a lot of the stuff that was just early days in like 2005, 2007 are the basis for kind of our modern internet today.
All right, folks. So I think
Exactly.
it's probably time that we go ahead and transition towards the end because we have been talking for a long time about Paranoia Agent. I think there's probably still even rabbit holes that we could go down with this show because there is a lot of angles to approach it and a lot of angles to discuss it. But I think we do have to call it quits at this point. So
Yes,
I
I
guess
feel like we barely scratched the surface, though.
I agree. But I think we're going to have to bring this one to a close. So I guess going around the circle, final words about Paranoia Agent, and what to you is the scene that will stand out most in your mind whenever you think about this show going forward. Tori, I'll toss it to you first.
Oh, yeah. My final word, if you haven't seen it, please go watch it. I think it is one of, Khan's best works and definitely a what's the word I'm looking for? Like I don't know, a shining example of what he does. Sure. And it's good. It's a good time. And standout scene to me, can I cheat and pick two?
If you have to.
Okay, thank you. Probably the one in the suicide episode where they're going to hang themselves in the tree and the girl just starts like jumping up and down and the guys are like, what's going on? Why aren't we dying? That was really funny to me. And then probably the one I already mentioned with the wife of the detective talking about how like she was no longer going to let her bad thoughts and bad feelings define how she was going to live her life.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
What do you think, Bill?
I say the show holds up extremely well. You should go see it. And I think it says a lot about stuff going on today, as we've talked about in this episode. And I if you like kind of smaller stories, kind of like if you like the beginning parts of Kaiba and their kind of individual tales, I would highly recommend Paranoia Agent for that. And just more Satoshi Kon work is always great. I highly recommend it. But my standout scene, I don't mean to be dark, but that whole sequence where the policeman's friend's daughter finds out about the cameras in her room and just
Dang.
you see it from the camera lens, it's just like, oh, it's so horrible. And
Yeah,
just
it's pretty horrifying.
Yeah.
and just
It's very striking.
and I felt just the anguish and just the anger and just the grossness of it, and that really affected me.
Did it make you want to check behind your furniture to make sure? Just to make sure.
It made me say those like camera systems setups you can do in your house. No, thank you. I don't want that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
All right, Tobias.
I mean, I think we covered it pretty well. It is the message behind it is still very, very prevalent today, more prevalent today than anything else, and important that we recognize, like Bill said, parasocial relationships and learn to accept responsibility and not let that escapism drive our lives, because it is not our lives. In fact, it's certainly different. Maybe one of the most different of Khan's works for sure. Still no less worth checking out. Absolutely. I think there's so many scenes in this that are great, but one I have to point out, we didn't really talk about it much, but in the episode with the two boys, the one that's really popular and great, there's a point in the beginning where when he smiles, he has that little sheen in his teeth,
Yeah.
And then when he looks at the camera and he goes ding, and then he looks away for a second and looks back at the camera and it goes ding again, like the second time. It's pitch perfect. Hilarious.
You could call this paranoid social relationships. But yeah, I mean, walking away from this, I'm extremely glad that I finally gave it a shot and watched more than just the first episode. and it's kind of a bummer to me that I'm now finished watching, with very few exceptions, some of his much smaller work. I am done watching all Satoshi Kon anime. I will never be able to experience it for the first time, but that's okay. That is okay. I enjoyed this show, even though I think some of Satoshi Kon's other work is a little bit more holistically impressive. The show is still extremely good, extremely tight, extremely relevant, and short at only 13 episodes. And I think it uses all 13 very, very well. It doesn't feel like there's any wasted time in this entire show. Like, every moment serves the next, and it's very, very well done. So I would highly recommend anybody to check this one out. It is a good, interesting, enjoyable, fun ride. For me, I think the scenes that stand out the most are, I like it when there's like the Moromi fever scene where you just see like Moromi everywhere. Like, that's very funny to me. Just like seeing that cute little dog just everywhere. But I guess I'm gonna cheat and do two, because I did one positive one, like seeing all the Moromis everywhere. But the one that might stand out to me, just because of how terrible it is, I'll do another one kind of in the vein of Bill, is when you see the flashback to what happened with Sagi and her dog, the dog that she named Moromi after. I'm just like, dang, I hate that I was forced to look at this, to see this cute little dog get hit by a car. And it was so gosh dang sad, and it really bummed me out, because it's just like, it just shows the fragility of a small animal like that, or a person, really. It's just like, one second you're there and the next you're gone, just through a freak accident. So that was a big bummer. But I don't like ending episodes on bummers. So what's something happy we can talk about? I don't know. Our website's pretty happy, thirdimpactanime.com. You can go there to find all of our previous episodes that we have recorded about a wide variety of anime topics. You can also follow us on our various social media accounts. We're most active over on Twitter at @TI_anime, and over on Instagram at thirdimpactanime. And I guess we're ending the episode, so yeah.
You know what also is pretty happy, Austin?
What's that, Tobias? What's happy?
Our Discord is pretty happy and pretty happening. Well, I'm looking at a rabbit right now, so it is happening if you think about it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've advertised it before, but it seems lately, I think, maybe because of our podcast with the cigars and sideburns and cigarettes, sideburns and cigarettes podcast. It just seems to be a new group of people, and we've been doing a lot of socializing and talking. It's been kind of a nice sort of pseudo revitalization, as if the place had ever gone away in the first place. So yeah, you should join our Discord. It's a fun, cool time where you get to talk to cool people.
Yeah.
Not me, though. I'm not a cool person.
Cool people with the exception of Tobias. And really by cool people, we just mean Basil.
Yes.
But yeah, our Discord is a fun time, and you should totally check it out. If you want to find our link to join it, it is free to open. It's not behind like a Patreon paywall or anything. You can just find it over on our website, thirdimpactanime.com, and find the Join the Discord button over on the right-hand side. And let's see, Tobias and Bill, you guys are working on a podcast sub-series. Would you like to tell the people a little bit about what you've been working on that they may or may not have listened to already?
Yeah, so we've got a Grand Line Reborn. This is a sort of co-production podcast that Bill and we basically got tired of talking shit to each other about some of our favorite shows and said, you know what, we're going to sit down and read One Piece and play Final Fantasy XIV. There's a specific channel in the Discord we mentioned that is kind of that's based around, but we've recorded episodes about our impressions about these two series. We've got episode 0 and episode 1 out now. I would think shortly after this episode goes live, we'll have actual episode 2 should be out, and we've got a couple side episodes we're working on as well. So I'm really excited to lead Bill through our unveil for the third time.
Oh boy.
Bill loves Iron Veil.
You know, my favorite.
And if you would like to support the podcast, again, you can do that simply by sharing our episodes with a friend, or if you use a podcast service that allows you to rate or review podcasts, you can do that for us. It would put a really nice smile on our face. It would give us a super bright day. If you'd like to share what you thought about Paranoia Agent, you can send us an email at thirdimpactanime@gmail.com, and we might talk about it on the air at some point. But my name is Austin. I've been your host for this evening, and you can find me and my personal Twitter over at BebopShock on Twitter. And that's basically all the social media and I do on a significant basis. But where can people connect with you, Tori?
Yeah, I actually haven't really been using Twitter, but if you want to follow me anyway, it's at Worst Waifu. I've mostly been hanging out in the Discord, and now I'm gonna go disassociate in my bed and have my stuffed animals talk to me for the rest of the night. Goodbye.
Take a rest. Take a rest. Take a rest.
Take a rest.
And Bill and Tobias, where can people connect with you guys?
Well, I'm also on Twitter. I don't know if you want to pair a social relationship with me because my Twitter's not the most fun thing in the world. So instead, I will plug my letterbox where I've been doing a lot of horror movie reviews. WB41999 on there, and like I've been preaching through this episode, the bonus features that are on the Blu-ray are really cool because we rarely, if ever, get any sort of bonus features involving Japanese production. Like I can name probably 2 or 3 Blu-rays that do that. Usually it's just the dub cast doing a random one-off commentary episode. So it was really cool to listen to the audio commentaries with Satoshi Kon, the writer and the producer from Wow Wow, which was the pay-per-view channel that Paranoia Agent aired on. And it gives you really cool insight. It's called Paranoia Radio, where first episode they talk about the writing process, second episode they talk about the production process, and third episode they talk about the sound production. So if you're really interested in like the nuts and bolts of how things are made, and just want to hear just Satoshi Kon speak, I highly recommend those bonus features as well. And my last thing is they also include a full-on storyboard playthrough of the first episode of Paranoia Agent, which is pretty cool.
So you're saying
Nice.
we should buy the Blu-ray? Is that what you're saying?
You know, or maybe it's at your local library you could rent. I don't know.
Oh,
you could do that.
Nice one, Bill. Nice one. Plug the local library. And where can people find you, Tobias?
I'm also on Twitter at Reverend_Tobias. That's where all my crap is.
And folks, I think that's all we've got for you. Thank you for joining us for our review of Paranoia Agent. I hope you have an excellent Halloween season. And above all things, remember to take a rest. 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 Take a rest.